Hello again, everybody. Here's an interesting game that was played in the Soviet Union back in 1977 with Nigmadzianov with the white pieces and Kaplan with the black. And it's an Alekhine defense. And it starts out this way. E4, knight f6, e5, knight d5, d4, d6, knight f3, bishop g4, bishop e2, c6, and now white hits at the knight with c4, and the knight retreats to b6. Now white brings out his other knight to d2, and black brings out his other knight to d7. And at this point the game gets a little interesting because white plays his knight out to g5, and black goes ahead and takes off the bishop at e2. And now, instead of just automatically recapturing with the queen, white plays his pawn up to e6. And at this point black plays his pawn to f6. Now, in case black had not made that move and instead gone ahead and captured white's queen, then that would have been a mistake, because white simply would have played e takes f7, checkmate. So if we go back to the original position, black plays his pawn to f6. Now white goes ahead and recaptures on e2, and black takes off the knight at g5. And once again, you would expect now white to just go ahead and recapture the knight on d7 and end up just losing a pawn. But instead, white plays his other knight to e4, which now gives black the opportunity of saving the knight, which he does by moving it to f6. And now white takes the pawn on g5 with the knight, with the obvious threat of now moving the knight to f7 with a double attack on black's queen and rook. So black immediately moves his queen up to c7, and sure enough, here comes the knight into f7. But now black can save the rook by moving it to g8. And now white plays his g-pawn forward with the threat of now playing it to g5 and hitting the knight. And you'll notice that the knight has no escape squares. So black plays his h-pawn, and now white plays his h-pawn up to h4, making the same threat, playing g5, and once the pawns are exchanged, again, the knight has no escape square. So, black plays d5, and white now plays c5, hitting at the knight again, and the knight retreats to c8. And now white goes ahead and plays the g-pawn up, attacking the knight. But now the knight has an escape square, and he can play now to e4, now that it's backed up with the pawn on d5. And if white should try to hit at the knight again with f3, then black can simply play the knight to g3 with a double attack on white's queen and rook. So if we go back to the original position, white goes ahead and just takes off the h-pawn, and black recaptures. And now white swoops to h5 with the queen, threatening a very nasty discovered check by moving the knight at f7. And at this point, black makes what looks like a really good move. He brings the knight back to f6, so that now if white does indeed try to play a discovered check, black can simply just take the queen. But it turns out it's just not good enough. And if you'd like to pause the video right now and see why, I'll wait for you. Okay, the reason it's not good enough is that white now plays the knight to d6 with a double check. And of course the only way to get out of a double check is to move the king. And the king only has one square, which is d8. And now white finishes off the game with a beautiful two-move combination. He sweeps down to e8 with the queen, check. And now the only move is that black has to capture the queen with the knight, which he does. And now white simply moves the knight back to f7, checkmate. It's not exactly a smothered mate, but it's sort of a half-smothered mate, since the pawn is guarding the d7 square. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed the game, and I'll see you next time.